One. Shalom and welcome to another edition of Parsha Talk. I'm Rabbi Elliot Malaman in Highland Park, New Jersey at the Highland Park Conservative Temple Congregation, Anshe Emet, and joining me my good friends, Rabbi Jeremy Kalmanovsky, Anshe Chesed, New York City, Rabbi Barry Chesler, Solomon Schechter Day School of Long Island. Barry, you guys finished this year? You're already done?
So the last Regents is tomorrow.
Last region. So
and grades are due on Friday.
And the graduation?
That was last last week.
Last week, okay. And we, you know what? We have to give a shout out, soon to be Rabbi Jason Rogoff, right? Our scholar in residence.
All right, that's Monday night.
Next Monday night is getting his ordination, being ordained at Machon Hadar. We send him a big mazel tov, yashikoach. I think we're going to be there to celebrate with him. Spend many hours with him studying Talmud together, and that is a great thing. So big shout out to Rabbi Jason Rogoff, soon to be, and family. And let's give a shout out to Korah, at least.
Was he also getting rabbinic ordination after all these years?
You know, he at least had the zechut to have a parsha named after him. Okay, so there must be something good about Korah. Or maybe it's a cautionary tale.
Just like Balak.
Indeed. Okay.
What is it? Is it only Balak, Korah,
Noach and Yitro.
Noach?
Yitro?
Yeah. So of the five people who have a parsha named after them.
And Chayei Sarah, if you want to count that.
Oh, good. That's a good one. Oh, and Kitetse Rosenwasser. Don't forget Kitetse Rosenwasser. But of those people, Korah's a bad guy. Balak, Yitro, and Noach are not Jewish, and Pinchas is a very, like ambivalent kind of figure.
Indeed. Wow. So who gets a parsha named after them and why? Okay. Well, so Korah is an interesting figure here. Our parsha opens with this verse: Vayikach Korah. Vayikach Korah, he takes, or as our JPS translation, Korah betook himself. Nobody speaks like that. Nobody betakes themselves. So
that's not even English.
Well,
what was that a translation into?
So it's an attempt to make the verb a nifal verb, right? The nifal reflective.
A reflective. Okay, so
it's, in a sense, it's an attempt to render the Rashi commentary. Vayikach et atzmo, he took himself.
Or the fact that there's no object to the word vayikach leaves us the ability to speculate as to what he takes.
Actually, Elliot, in light of the conversation we had before where we were recording, he literally has no object. He has no goal.
He has no goal.
But he's just rebelling.
That's very interesting. By the way, I just want to say one thing to our throngs of listeners and friends. We are able to have these conversations, and Jews have been able to have these conversations for so many centuries, partly because of certain features of the biblical text. And when you read them in English, like you open up your Eitz Chaim or your JPS, which is the same, or whatever other Bible that you happen to open, your translation has made sense of it already for you. The translation has, at whatever level, smoothed out the ambiguities, but the Hebrew will always have, it'll have more space in there. It'll always, have certain ambiguities. And when there is something like Vayikach Korah without a direct object, Korah took ... or there are many other examples that are like this, and Cain says to his brother Abel, and there's nothing else after that. It doesn't say what happened. Or Isaac and Abraham. And so the Hebrew reader, who pays close attention to the grammar and the syntax, is going to have whole vast areas for speculation and for interpretation, which are one of the things that makes Torah study so special.
Well, that's what we're doing here. We're trying to fill in the blank. We're trying to answer the question, and the text is inviting us to that very question. Barry.
So the advantage of the new JPS translation, which is already close to 40 years old, is that it often will say when the Hebrew is not understood.
Right.
There's a difficulty in the text. The old JPS translation from 1917 never said that. So when you read that in English, you never knew if the problem was with you or the text. But in the new JPS translation, they don't have a note here for Vayikach Korach, right? It doesn't say Hebrew not understood or difficult.
Can we just dip a pinky toe into the Midrash here? We didn't talk about this, but it's so delightful. The Midrash that says that Vayikach Korach, what did he take? He took a talis. He took the talit that was completely tchelet, and he asked Moshe, does a completely blue piece of garment that you wear, a four-cornered garment, does it need tzitzit? Which is a great question. Does a home that is filled with holy books require a mezuzah? And these questions are great questions because they're the kind of annoying question that you would get from like a 12-year-old. And there's a truth to that question. The question has a premise which says, why are you doing this? And the assumption that the only reason why you're doing it is because I said so.
Well, that midrash about the beged shekulo techela, the entirely, first of all, to just clue the readers in, or clue our listeners in, the last item in the previous parsha is the commandment of tzitzit, where it says you should put on the corners of your tzitzit one blue thread, and the immediate next thing is vayikach korach. And of course, the Torah isn't naturally divided up into parshiot. It's not naturally divided up into weekly sections. It's just one sequence. One thing comes sequentially after the other. So the just brilliance of this midrash is you get the mitzvah of a single blue thread, really important because techelet, or whatever color it actually looked like in ancient times, was a symbol of royalty and priesthood and being part of the elite. And the amazingly beautiful democratizing practice of Judaism that every single Jew gets at least one thread of royalty, at least one thread of priesthood. And then Korach shows up, and this is why the Midrash is so brilliant, and this is one of the reasons why the Midrash is so brilliant. Korach shows up, and we already know that he's a self-aggrandizing, power-hungry kind of guy. And he's exactly the kind of guy who would like to say, you know what? I have an all blue garment. I don't have one thread. I got the whole thing. And the Midrash makes him out to be precisely the kind of person who wants power not to serve the people, but for his own ego gratification.
Maybe the Midrash is saying he's just a complete annoying person. I'm reminded of the late Rabbi Isaac Klein, who wrote the book Guide to Jewish Religious Practice. His grandson used to go to Raman Kennedy. He described after Rabbi Klein wrote a tshuva that permitted, cheese, ordinary cheese. So there was a Kohen that brought him some ordinary cheese and basically said, "I want you to eat that in front of me." But it's annoying. There's a totally unsavory and annoying thing about it, and yet there's a certain element of, he's got some
Well, it was unsavory, Elliot.
Question.
It was unsavory because it was blue cheese.
Blue cheese. No. On the one hand, none of us would like to, disallow a question. We would consider, I speak for myself, but I'm almost, certain you would agree, no question really is out of bounds. We're prepared to understand, we're prepared to engage with all questions, because we understand that when someone brings a question, when someone asks a question, it's often not just a fact question, it's often or not a reason question, but it's an invitation to a dialogue. And so here, the question I'm asking about the Midrash is it an invitation to a dialogue, or is it an invitation to, oh my God, here he goes again with this stupid question?
Well, I think that, like I said, I think the Midrash is not so concerned with the question, but Korach's portrayal of himself as an all blue garment kind of guy. But we are in favor of every sincere question.
Okay.
But there's also questions that are al manat lekanter, that are really just provocative and to make somebody look bad and to gotcha and to be a nudnik. It's like Elliot. You and I have spoken in the past about the famous Hillel Shammai story,
Yes.
Shammai, the non-Jew comes to this, convert me on the condition that you can teach me the whole Torah while I stand on one foot. And Shammai smacks him in the face and tells him to get the hell out of here. And Hillel offers the gentle answer of Madasani alach lechavrech lo ta'avid. What's hateful to you, don't do to somebody else. And opens up, Zohi Torah kula v'idach perusha. This is the whole Torah, and the rest is commentary. And Hillel's supposed to win that story, but I know that you feel that
I do feel
that Shammai's got something.
Defense here only because he's defending the integrity of the Torah, and he's basically saying something that's quite true and real, which is you can't learn the Torah on one foot. There's no way to condense the Torah down to one specific thing, notwithstanding Hillel's beautiful thing. It's that you have to give the Torah the seriousness that it requires. And I'm always comforted by the fact that Shammai in Pirkei Avot is the one that is Sever Panim Yafot. He's the one that's full of joy, but he's a person that takes this seriously and takes responsibility seriously, and he doesn't win here. That's the point. And I think there's something appealing about losing too in that case. Okay. One more little comment I want to mention on Vayikach Korah. He takes advantage. That's Shadal, Shmuel David Latzato, a 19th century commentator, very interesting commentator. He takes advantage of the hour. He takes advantage of the hour, the time, because there's a weakness. The people, if you read the story consecutive to the story of the spies, the people are at their lowest morale. And correct me if I'm wrong, not that I know of demagoguery, but demagoguery has a certain talent for taking advantage and hearing, certain vulnerabilities in the populace and seizing on that vulnerability, seizing on a low morale and saying, I alone
can fix this.
I alone can fix this.
I think that, first of all, I love that comment. Thank you for pointing that out to me, which I didn't know. But let's read this story with Korach and his claim that, Rav Lachem, you have taken too much on yourselves. You guys are power hungry. Korach says, you guys are power hungry, and I'm the Democrat, which is suspect. I'm the Democrat wearing an all blue garment. But just let's read the story in conversation with two parshiot ago. In Behalotecha, Aaron and Miriam say, Moses isn't the only one here, and we should have more elevated status. And God says, Moshe is extremely humble. And also, you have the Eldad Umedad episode, in which they are given a gift of prophecy, which somewhat is, the details aren't so important right now, but they're somewhat coloring outside the lines. And Joshua says, you have to arrest these people. And Moshe says, no, listen, what I want is actually a greater diffusion of the divine gift. And so we have Korach, we have Joshua, we have Aaron and Miriam, all of whom at some level are anxious, positive or negative, that Moses be the only guy, that Moses have all the power. And Moses himself is more than once on record as saying, I actually want more power sharing, which I think is pretty interesting.
And so are you saying that in that wedge, Korach is maybe inserting himself? Is that a defensive,
I'm saying that Korach is not the only person in the book of Numbers who is anxious about Mosaic authority. It's actually a recurring theme.
Interesting.
And in Behalotecha, in the episode of the 70 prophets, clearly the Torah comes down and says it's good to share this gift. That's the whole point. And with respect to Aaron and Miriam, there is a modified affirmation of Moses' power. But that power comes, that authority, that Hooray Moses moment comes at least partly because Moshe is humble and doesn't want it all for himself. He does want to share it. And he does happen to be Moshe Rabbeinu, and he's got more wisdom and more connection with God than other people.
But what I would say is that Korach feels himself exposed. And I like your connecting it with the story of Aaron and Miriam, because I was thinking of that as well. And what that story has to do with is access to God. And in a certain sense, Korach is bemoaning that he does not seem to have access to God that he should have. So if you look at the verse, which of course I just had, verse Gimel. Vayikalu al Moshe v'al Aaron, and they gathered against Moses and Aaron. Vayomer aleichem rab lachem, and they said to them, "You've done too much. Ki kol ha'edah kulam kedoshim." The entire community is holy. Uv'tocham Adonai. God is in their midst. Curiously, Korach doesn't include himself in that. Doesn't say God is Seinu. He says B'tocham.
Madua.
And umadua titnasu al kahal Adonai. Why do you lift yourself up over the assembly of God? And I think that Korach is not feeling quite so divine or connected to the divine, and that's really his problem, is that by all rights, every Israelite should have a connection to God. That's really the democratic message of, I think, biblical religion, if we want to give it one. And Korach doesn't feel that, and so he's ticked off.
By the way, I want to just strengthen this point. The Vitocham, well, let's just remember one of the signal verses of the whole thing. Vasuli mikdash v'shachanti Vitocham. The whole point, and the Kedoshim Tihiyu passage of Leviticus 19 also is like, this is the Yisrael Kanol's famous argument that most of the book of Leviticus is about the sanctity of the ritual, the sanctity of the priests, the sanctity of the unblemished or undefiled body. And then Leviticus 19 comes up and says, Hiroshim to you know, Daber el kol adat b'nei Israel, speak to the entire Israelite community and say, all of you can be holy, and it's primarily in social relations, honoring your parents, not cursing the deaf or tripping the blind, get rid of your hate, not bearing grudges, and loving your neighbor as yourself and loving the stranger. That the Leviticus 19 is a major affirmation that ki kol ha'edah kulam kedoshim u'v'tocham Adonai. So Korach has a lot of good biblical religious meaning on his side, and because every Jew who's ever opened up Numbers 16, that is to say, anybody who's inherited the Torah, that we have inherited. We're not taking a time machine to see this particular fight. We have a story that we've inherited. Any Jew who's ever opened the Torah already knows that Korach's a bad guy. We already know the end. We already know what the end is. And so we read that he's got something legitimate, even wise sounding to say, and we just don't believe he means it.
So this leads me to the question, which is that, so Moses challenges him and says, Bokir, come tomorrow morning, take your fire pans, and we'll see. And the question I have is really maybe a silly question, which is, why does he agree to this? Does he really think he's going to win? Or is there another reason he has to do this? Is he leading his group? He has 250 people with him. Is he just leading them off the cliff here?
I don't want to get. Actually, I kind of totally do want to get very practical American politics right now, but I'm going to be somewhat judicious.
Okay.
As we record this here in June of 2023. So I had a funeral today, and not the immediate family, but a very close friend is a federal judge, and he came from a meeting. And what was your meeting about? He said, well, the judges of the Second Circuit, we're all getting together and talking about the meaning of the rule of law. Okay, the rule of law. And this guy didn't say this, my congregation didn't say this, but the way I was thinking about what he meant by that is that we actually have a social, people have to agree to play by the rules for the rule of law to work. And we have a former president right now who's being charged, and you sort of imagine at some point he's going to say, I'm not going to pay attention to this rule, but he can't, because there's no legitimacy unless he says the process which we all share, I am going to pay respect to that process. If Korach just said, okay, Moshe, the hell with you, I'm not coming, then what claim would he have to say, really, I want to be the leader of Am Yisrael in service of God? No, like if he says, the hell with you, I'm breaking off and starting my own band, or I don't respect your authority or whatever, then it would be like somebody indicted who just refused to show up in court.
So,
No, but it also suggests, I think, that, as again I mentioned before the show, is that Korach and even Moshe does not know whether it's going to work or not. Right? There's a certain amount of bravado here, and perhaps bluster on the part of Korach, because at any moment you could have the winning hand and you might not have the winning hand. But you don't know. It's like the contest between two athletes, the pitcher and the hitter. So I think one of the things we often overlook is that in real life, we don't know the results until afterwards. As you mentioned, Jeremy, we know the story already, so we know how it ends. But as this actually plays out, they don't know, right? Moses' batting average is not 1,000.
yeah, but
Sometimes he misses. And this could be one of those times.
So the way I interpret what you're saying, Barry, is that Korach really understands that he has legitimacy here, that he is an underdog, that he is an opposition, and that in order to prove himself, he does have to show up. In order to play by the rules, he has to show up. And yet, because we know the end of the story, it's hard not to see in his act of showing up a tremendous arrogance that costs the lives of 250 people. And
willing participants, as far as
willing participants, yes, but you would think that, so Moses issues the challenge basically, and they go back to their tents, or they go back to their meeting place, right? So play out the meeting, right? Korach stands and says, well, everybody's got to get their fire pans ready, and so wouldn't somebody kind of raise their hand and say, listen, Korach, maybe we should concede at this point? Or are they all bamboozled by him? Are they all swayed by his opinion and he has charisma? Maybe it's the charisma, maybe it's the arrogance, and maybe it's that we have nothing to lose now because Moses is taking us out of a land that's flowing with milk and honey into the desert, and we're never going to get to the land of milk and honey anyway. There's nothing to lose here.
I'm going to go with that one. Not only, I'm going to go with a combination of several things you said. One is Moses has, like, perhaps at some level, as these folks say, failed. We got the richest country in the world, and we're in some dang desert. We just got sentenced with 40 more years of being in this dang desert. But I'm going to go with, to keep it in American politics in the early 21st century, I'm going to go with, people love this demagogue. He has swayed them. He has carried them away on his charisma. And some of us look at him and say, that's charisma? I don't understand why you find it charismatic, but lots of people do find it charismatic. And if the demagogue tells somebody things which are false on the face, for which there is no evidence, but he keeps saying them, people keep saying, I totally believe this guy. The election was stolen. Moshe Rabbeinu is an illegitimate leader, and we're actually the true and authentic leaders here. So I'm going to go with charismatic, carries away the people, and they're true believers. Even if it's stupid, they're true believers.
But even if it's catastrophic, and this is what's painful about this story is that, and of course, we get to the next scene and they obviously lose, and Moses stands up before them and says basically, V'im Bria Yivram, reading chapter 16, verse 30, Ufatzta ha'adama et piha, let the earth open up its mouth, uval'a otam, and swallow them up, vet kol asher lahem, and all that there is for them, v'yardu chayim she'ola, and let them go down to Sheol alive, v'yidatem, and you will know, they will know, you will know, that they have wrongfully challenged God. In other words, this is the folly of of the charismatic demagogue. The charismatic demagogue doesn't really care about the followers, and in this tragic moment, 250 people are killed. They're swallowed up by the earth, which is another big puzzle. Why, how this punishment meets the crime here, that they would be swallowed up and go down to Sheol alive. But the
punishment meets the crime because of the graphic knowledge of, the story is told in terms of a rising and sinking. So Moses says to Korah says, "Madua titnasu," why do you lift yourself up?
Yeah.
And so he wants to lift himself up, and what's going to happen. Midah keneged midah. He's going down.
I think also Sheol signifies, and there's a bit of a cue in the word Sheol, that's where you end up when you are really bad. And it's interesting when Jacob mourns for the torn garment he sees in front of himself, and he says, Ered el beni avel she'ola, I'm going to go down to my son in mourning, she'ola. There's a sense that when he uses that word she'ol, it's about, I'm guilty for this.
So what I would say is not so much guilty, but Sheol, making a drash on the connection with the root letters Shin Aleph Lamed, is a question. It's for things that are unresolved. So Jacob, when he says it, his grief is unresolved because he doesn't quite know what happened to Yosef. And for Korah, what's unresolved is his claim to leadership.
But his unresolved guilt, I guess, his unresolved, the sense that he's evil, or that he's wrong, or that
I don't know that he's evil. We do have the problem with his son surviving to go write some Psalms later.
Indeed.
We'll make it into our Psalm book.
No, I just know one more thing. First of all, I love, Barry, that was awesome about the Sheol She'elah, and maybe could tie into what Ellie was saying before about the nudnik questions of the things that he wants to ask. But I want to throw one more thing in there about the beauty of reading it in Hebrew. Okay, so that Moshe means drawn from the water, and maybe you can figure out that Abraham is father of many nations, and Yaakov is the trickster who grabs the heel. Korach is baldy. He's baldy. He's one of the only people that we know something about. We guess their appearance. A Kareach is a bald person. Eliyahu Navi is portrayed as he's described as being very hairy, and Korach and Elisha, his disciples, portrayed also as being Kareach, and Korach probably means that the guy's bald.
All right, so let me. We're coming to the end here. I just want to ask a question relating to Moses. Okay, so Moses successfully neutralizes this opposition, and there's a plague that breaks out, and there's all sorts of calamity that happens. So let me pose it as you're the political advisor, you're the consultant to Moses. And of course, this consulting not being in the Torah. So what would you advise Moses in order to restore a sense of calm, or a sense of control, or a sense of we're going to get through this together? What would be the political advice you'd give him in order to get back into the people's plus?
So the story has answered it for you, Elliot, because there are no bones, because they went down to the She'olah alive. So there is no burial, and their bodies have not disintegrated around their bones that would be left to bury.
Okay.
I think the image that we're left with is that they disappeared completely. They did not leave a trace.
No, I'm asking about
what you advise Moshe, I think, is I don't know that he needs a lot of advice. I think one of the things that becomes clear is that Moses is actually a very skilled politician. And I think we could give him credit for understanding people. And in light of that, I think when he tells Korach to show up, he's challenging him and putting Korach in a very difficult situation because, as you said, he has to show up.
Yeah,
That might not have been Korach's original objective.
No, right.
Yeah. Now there's in this. I'm on a roll here with the fables, with the allegories to contemporary life. But you already have people talking about. It's interesting that people who are ostensibly Trump's allies didn't run to he's really innocent. They ran to he deserves a pardon, and which they probably means that they don't really think he is innocent. And so I'm thinking about Putin as well. Putin's critics end up dead or in Siberia, and like I said before, I like the Moshe Rabbeinu who says, when John, go back to Bahalotcha, Eldad and Medad are prophesying in the camp. Joshua says, arrest them and send them to Siberia. Moshe says, we can actually deal with we can deal comfortably and profitably with a little bit of ferment, even dissent. So I say, it's not in the Torah. I'm making up my own story here, because obviously what happens to the band of Korach happens. Korach v'kol arato happens. But I say, maybe we're working in rabbinic Judaism to some version of Elu v'elu divrei Elohim chayim. These and those are the words of the living God. Korach is the guy who says everybody's holy. That's in the Torah. Korach is the guy who says that God is in the midst of the community. That's in the Torah. And maybe we can profitably listen to Korach without having the earth swallow him up. And a certain amount of dissent is always healthy in a society.
Interesting. Look, the story unfolds in the Parsha where Moses' authority, or Aaron, the Mate Aharon, the Aaron's authority is demonstrated with the flowering. That it tries to restore authority to Aaron, and obviously successfully does. And then we get to next week's Parsha. The answer I would give to this question is he simply goes on. Zot chukat Torah. He simply goes on legislating. He behaves as Moses is. This insurrection, this moment of rebellion, is awful. It's tragic. It's hard to read the story every year. I always it's upsetting. It's upsetting that this happened. Right? I can't read the story without feeling, even though I know how it ends, that there's something very dangerous here. There's something very difficult here, and maybe this sense of rebellion still exists within the people. That there's and we have this propensity sometimes, and sometimes it really can destroy us. We have this tendency. We have a moment now in Israel where we have a tremendous kind of upswell of anger, and if it's channeled in a way that is violent, negative, it can be catastrophic for us.
Maybe he goes on legislating. That's a great observation. But the specific content of the legislation in Numbers 19 is, here's how you respond to death.
Yeah.
Here's how you come back from death back into life. So maybe he's saying to the people, all right, we got some healing. The long national nightmare is going to come to an end.
That's great. That would be the way to purify yourself from this. It gives us a ritual for that. But in a way, it says, look, we've experienced a cataclysm, and we have to figure out a way to not purge that, but to have that part of our story, our national story. Our national story has to take into account that this event took place. Barry, you have a last word you want to comment on?
No, you spoke very well.
Okay, very good. All right, folks. Well, we want to thank you all for watching, for listening. To friends of ours at Machane Ramah in the Berkshires, I think there are people there populating the Berkshires.
I hope they're listening to us. I hope they're hearing us. On
hope
Korah, 102.3 FM.
Absolutely. We thank Mitch Mernick for doing this, for putting it up. And we look forward to joining you during the summer. And we want to wish everyone a beautiful Shabbat. So Shabbat Shalom. We'll see you next
Shabbat Shalom.
another edition of Parasha Talk.